Eldon's lips curled into something between a sneer and a smile as he leaned back in his chair. The morning sun streaming through his office window cast long shadows across the polished oak desk between us, the desk worth more than my monthly salary. "You're demoted for not respecting company family," he said coldly, tapping his fingers against the genetic reports I'd submitted last week. Reports showing his son had cost us $4 million in errors I refused to cover up. "Porter is the future of this operation, and you've undermined him at every turn." My throat tightened. 8 years of building the most respected equine genetic testing program in the industry, reduced to this moment. Outside the window, thoroughbreds worth millions grazed on Kentucky bluegrass, unaware their bloodlines were being corrupted by nepotism and pride. "Effective when?" I asked softly, surprised by the steadiness in my voice despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Eldon smiled, thinking he'd won. "After the quarterly shareholder meeting, 3 days, and my replacement, Porter will oversee the genetic testing division, with support staff to handle the technical aspects." Porter, who couldn't tell a genetic marker from a magic marker. The same Porter who had ignored my explicit warnings about inbreeding coefficients, approving matches between related bloodlines, despite glaring recessive disease markers. "The testing program requires specialized expertise," I said carefully. The shareholders expect results, Leora." Eldon cut me off, rising from his chair. "And frankly, your obsession with genetic purity is holding us back from producing winners. Porter understands what buyers want: speed, not your theoretical health concerns." Theoretical. 7 foals born with devastating genetic conditions this season alone. 4 dead already. The others suffering. $4 million in championship potential destroyed. And families who had purchased our breeding rights demanding explanations I refuse to falsify. "You'll transition your files to Porter tomorrow," Eldon continued, "and prepare a statement accepting responsibility for the testing irregularities. We'll position your demotion as a mutual career shift during the shareholder meeting. And if I refuse?" His smile vanished. "Your contract includes confidentiality clauses. Break them, and you'll never work with horses again." I stood up slowly, gathering my dignity like armor. I understand perfectly. Walking through the marble-floored atrium of Winston Farms, I felt eyes following me. Everyone knew. Administrative assistants suddenly needed to check their phones. Trainers who normally stopped me with questions about bloodlines suddenly remembered urgent tasks elsewhere. In my laboratory, I closed the door and leaned against it, finally allowing the trembling to take over my body. Tears burned, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not here. Not when there was work to do. My computer screen showed the database I'd built over 8 years. Every horse, every genetic marker, every breeding recommendation, and every override Porter had initiated against my advice. The database didn't lie. It couldn't be intimidated or demoted. 3 days until the shareholder meeting. 3 days to decide what kind of person I wanted to be. Hey, before we continue this story, I just wanted to thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this corporate drama so far, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this one. Your support means everything, and it helps me keep creating content you'll love. Now, let's get back to what happened next. My name is Leora Webb, and I never planned to become a whistleblower. Growing up on a modest horse farm in Virginia, I'd fallen in love with equine genetics during college, fascinated by how DNA influenced everything from a horse's speed to its susceptibility to disease. When Winston Farms offered me the position of head veterinary geneticist 8 years ago, it seemed like a dream. The operation was legendary. 6 Kentucky Derby winners in 2 decades, breeding stock that commanded 7-figure stud fees, and a reputation for excellence that attracted royal families and racing enthusiasts from around the world. Eldon Winston had built an empire on horseflesh and blue ribbons, When I joined, he respected my expertise. Science gives us an edge, he'd told me then. Your work ensures our buyers get what they pay for, genetic excellence. For 5 years, it worked beautifully. Our testing program became the industry standard. I identified recessive health issues before they spread through bloodlines. We culled problem traits while enhancing speed, endurance, and temperament. Buyers paid premium prices because they trusted our genetic guarantees. Then Porter arrived, fresh from dropping out of veterinary school. Too much memorization, not enough practical work, he'd explained. Porter was 32, charming with buyers, and completely unqualified for any position involving scientific judgment. Yet Eldon installed him as director of breeding selection, a position that should have required years of specialized training. Learn from Leora, Eldon instructed his son. Her technical knowledge combined with your instinct for winners will take us to the next level. I tried. For 18 months, I attempted to teach Porter the basics of genetic science. He nodded, smiled, took notes he never reviewed. Meanwhile, he made breeding decisions based on gut feeling and what would tell a good story to buyers. When I objected with scientific evidence, he'd pat my shoulder. Numbers don't win races, Leora. Heart does. Heart doesn't prevent genetic disorders. The real trouble began 6 months ago. Porter became fixated on a stallion named Midnight Commander. Beautiful, fast, championship bloodlines, but carrying a recessive gene for degenerative joint disease. My testing flagged him for limited breeding only, and never with mares from certain bloodlines that might also carry the recessive marker. Porter overruled me. His speed genetics are too valuable to restrict, he'd argued in front of Eldon. Besides, what are the odds that we'd match him with a mare carrying the same recessive trait? The odds were 28% with the breeding plan he proposed. I showed them the data. Porter called me paranoid. Eldon sided with his son. 7 foals were born this season from those prohibited matches. 3 with severe joint deformities were euthanized weeks after birth. 1 died during delivery. 3 more showed early symptoms of conditions that would eventually cripple them. Buyers who had invested millions in our breeding program wanted answers. Tell them it was an unforeseeable genetic mutation, Porter had instructed me. Natural variation, nothing to do with our breeding selections. I refused. The genetic testing clearly showed the connection. The records proved I had warned against exactly these outcomes. Yesterday, I received a message from our largest buyer, an Emirates sheik, who had purchased breeding rights to 2 affected foals. My veterinarians found concerning genetic patterns. Please explain immediately. I sent him the truth. The complete genetic profiles showing the inbreeding coefficient was above safe thresholds, explaining that these matches had proceeded against my documented recommendations. 2 hours later, Eldon called me to his office. Now, sitting in my lab with my career in tatters, I faced an impossible choice: accept blame for others' mistakes and preserve my professional future, or risk everything to protect the horses and the truth. My phone chimed with a message from Eldon. Need your statement accepting responsibility by morning. Keep it professional. I closed my eyes, remembering the foals born with twisted limbs, remembering the trust buyers placed in our genetic guarantees, remembering the oath I'd taken as a veterinary scientist to prevent animal suffering. Opening my eyes, I began not the statement Eldon wanted, but a comprehensive analysis of our entire breeding program, every inappropriate match, every override of scientific advice, every projected outcome if we continue down this path. By morning, I had created something else entirely, a presentation that would either save Winston Farms from itself or burn my career to the ground. The choice was clear now. Sometimes, the only way forward is through fire. As dawn broke over the horse pastures, I made one final decision. Eldon had given me 3 days until the shareholder meeting. 3 days that he thought would be my professional funeral preparation. He had no idea they would become his instead. The morning of the shareholder meeting arrived with a heavy mist hanging over Winston Farms. From my cottage on the property, I could see the main complex where portraits of champion thoroughbreds lined hallways that smelled of leather, money, and tradition. I dressed with deliberate care, charcoal gray suit, crisp white blouse, hair pulled back in a severe knot. Professional, unassailable. The thumb drive in my pocket contained 8 years of data that would either save this place or burn it down. My phone buzzed with a text from Mira, my lab assistant, who'd been with me since day one. Are you sure about this? He'll destroy you. I texted back, some things matter more than careers. The shareholders' meeting would be held in the trophy room, where glass cases displayed silver cups and gold embossed awards from decades of racing triumphs. As I approached, I saw sleek cars parked outside, German engineering, Italian design, American muscle. The power players had arrived. Inside, 23 people mingled over coffee and pastries. Old money in tailored suits, new money in designer casual, all with one thing in common. Millions invested in horses they believed represented genetic perfection. Eldon stood near the head of the table, Porter at his side. Porter wore a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, but he'd already loosened his tie. His easy smile faltered when he saw me. Eldon's eyes narrowed. You're early. I'm still head geneticist until this meeting concludes, I replied, setting my leather portfolio on the table. Where would you like me to sit? He gestured to a chair near the back. The genetic summary has been removed from today's agenda. We'll address the breeding program transition instead. I nodded and took my assigned seat, not bothering to correct his assumption. The room filled quickly with shareholders greeting each other with backslaps and air kisses, wealthy investors who treated Winston Farms as both passion and profit center. At precisely 9, Byron Merritt, chairman of the board, called the meeting to order. At 72, Byron had the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades at racetracks, but his eyes missed nothing. He'd been skeptical of Porter's promotion from the start. Before we begin, Byron said, I'd like to acknowledge our international shareholders joining us today. Sheikh Hamad, wonderful to have you with us again. The sheikh nodded, his expression unreadable. He'd purchased breeding rights to 2 of the compromised foal lines. Eldon smoothly took control. Our agenda today focuses on our strategic vision. Porter has prepared an exciting expansion proposal. But first, I have a personnel announcement. Here it came. I clasped my hands tightly in my lap. After 8 years of service, Leora Webb will be transitioning from her role as head of genetic testing to a supporting laboratory position. This shift will allow Porter to implement his innovative breeding strategy with a more streamlined approval process. Several shareholders exchanged glances. One, an Austrian countess who bred dressage champions, raised her hand. May I ask why? Dr. Webb's genetic program is why many of us invested here. Eldon's smile never wavered. While we value Leora's contributions, we've identified inefficiencies in the testing protocols that have led to some communication issues. Communication issues? The question came from Sheikh Hamad, his voice quiet but clear. Is that what you call the genetic disease that killed my foal last month? The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Eldon cleared his throat. We're investigating isolated incidents that 7 incidents this season, I said, my voice cutting through his. $4 million in losses. Not isolated and not unpredictable. Every head turned toward me. Eldon's face darkened. This isn't the appropriate time, Leora. Actually, Byron interjected, as shareholders investing in a breeding program built on genetic excellence, I believe this is precisely the appropriate time. He turned to me. Dr. Webb, would you care to elaborate? I stood, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. The genetic testing program flagged dangerous breeding combinations that were subsequently approved against scientific recommendation. The affected foals suffered preventable conditions directly linked to inbreeding coefficients that exceeded safe thresholds. That's not possible, Porter said, his casual confidence slipping. I personally reviewed all breeding selections. Yes, you did, I agreed. After overriding the genetic safety protocols I established, I removed a stack of bound reports from my portfolio and began passing them around the table. This analysis details every breeding pair approved in the last 18 months, the genetic markers that raised concerns, the documented warnings my team provided, and the resulting health outcomes. The sheikh flipped through the pages, his expression darkening. This shows you explicitly warned against breeding Northern Storm with any mare from the Midnight Commander line due to recessive traits. Yes, that recommendation was overruled. By whom? The Countess asked. Porter leaned forward. The genetic testing is just one factor in breeding decisions. My father and I considered market demands, speed traits. Page 38, I interrupted. The inbreeding coefficient chart shows how closely related these bloodlines had become under the current breeding program. The industry standard is below 12.5%. Winston Farms has been averaging 18.7% this season, with some pairs as high as 25%. A murmur ran through the room. These people might not be scientists, but they understood numbers, especially when those numbers affected their investments. This is absurd, Eldon snapped. Porter has introduced innovations that will revolutionize our breeding program. Like what? Asked an elderly man who owned racing stables in Kentucky. Porter straightened his shoulders. We're prioritizing speed genetics over conservative health markers. Every breakthrough requires bold thinking. Bold thinking, produced Windmaker, I countered, referring to last season's most promising colt, a horse born with navicular disease that was concealed from buyers until after purchase. The room erupted. Windmaker had sold for $2.3 million to a consortium represented at this very table. That's slander, Eldon hissed. It's documented, I replied, pointing to the report. Page 42 shows the pre-sale testing that identified early markers for the condition, alongside the altered report provided to buyers. Byron's face had gone grim. Eldon, is this accurate? Absolutely not. Eldon's voice boomed with practiced authority. These are complex scientific issues being deliberately misconstrued. Porter and I have built a vision for Winston Farms that transcends the limited perspective of laboratory technicians. Laboratory technicians. The Austrian Countess's eyebrows shot up. Dr. Webb has 3 advanced degrees in equine genetics. Her research on recessive trait identification changed the industry. And her excessive caution is handicapping our breeding program, Porter countered. Every superior bloodline carries some genetic risk. Our competitors understand this balance. That's why they're outpacing us in producing winners. Winners with shortened careers and painful conditions, I said quietly. Is that the legacy you want for Winston Farms? The tension in the room was palpable. I could see shareholders mentally calculating the financial implications, not just the immediate losses, but the potential lawsuits, the reputation damage, the future devaluation of their investments. Byron cleared his throat. I believe we need to address these concerns before proceeding with any transition or expansion plans. He turned to me. Dr. Webb, what would you recommend? I felt Eldon's glare burning into me, but kept my eyes on Byron. A complete review of all breeding selections for the upcoming season. Transparent genetic profiles provided to all shareholders and buyers, and immediate notification to anyone who purchased potentially compromised bloodlines. That would tank our reputation, Porter protested. Your breeding decisions already did that, shot back the sheikh. I've invested over $30 million in your bloodlines based on genetic guarantees you've apparently violated. Eldon rose. commanding the room through sheer force of personality. This is becoming unnecessarily adversarial. Dr. Webb has presented her perspective, but I assure you, the reality is more nuanced. Perhaps we should adjourn to review these claims privately before making hasty judgments. It was a skilled move. Break the momentum, separate the shareholders, work them individually. I'd seen him do it before when faced with opposition. Not this time. Before we adjourn, I said, there's something else the shareholders should see. Eldon's eyes flashed warning. We've heard enough, Leora. Actually, Byron said, as chairman, I determine when we've heard enough. Please continue, Dr. Webb. I reached into my portfolio and removed a second report, thinner than the first. This projects the genetic outcomes of the next 3 breeding seasons under Porter's approved plan. As I distributed copies, the room fell silent. The data was devastating. Projected disease rates climbing to 40% within 3 years. Catastrophic joint issues appearing in multiple bloodlines. Fertility problems becoming endemic. A tech investor from California was the first to speak. This shows we'd be selling genetically compromised horses while continuing to market them as premium stock. That's not just bad business, it's potentially fraudulent. Precisely why Dr. Webb is being removed, Eldon said smoothly. Her doom and gloom projections are designed to undermine modernization efforts. These aren't projections, I corrected. They're mathematical certainties based on genetic inheritance patterns. The science is unambiguous. The room had divided now, some shareholders leaning toward Eldon, others clearly alarmed by my findings. Byron studied both reports, his expression grave. I propose, he said finally, that we table the leadership transition and expansion plans pending a full genetic audit by an independent third party. Unnecessary, Eldon said. We can handle this internally. That approach has evidently failed, the Countess replied. I second Byron's proposal. All in favor? Byron asked. Hands rose around the table. Not all, but enough. A clear majority. Eldon's face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. Very well. We'll cooperate with an external review, which I'm confident will vindicate our breeding program. And in the meantime, the Sheikh added, all breeding decisions will require scientific approval, not just Winston family approval. Another vote, another defeat for Eldon. As the meeting shifted to other business, Porter leaned over to whisper something to his father. Eldon nodded, then glanced at me with cold calculation. The message was clear. This isn't over. I knew that. In fact, it was just beginning. During the lunch break, I stepped onto the veranda overlooking pastures where million-dollar thoroughbreds grazed. The mist had cleared, revealing a perfect Kentucky day. Behind me, I heard footsteps approach. You've started a war you can't win, Porter said, stopping beside me. His voice was casual, almost friendly. Dad built this place through connections you can't imagine. One board meeting won't change that. I turned to face him. This isn't about winning, Porter. It's about those horses. I nodded toward the fields, and the people who trust us to breed them ethically. He laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Ethics don't win races. Results do. Dead foals aren't results. His smile vanished. You think you're untouchable because of your fancy degrees, but you're about to learn how this industry really works. Before I could respond, his father appeared in the doorway. Porter, a word. As he walked away, Porter whispered, watch your back, Leora. Dad doesn't forgive people who cross him. I watched them huddled in intense conversation, occasionally glancing my way. Whatever they were planning, I needed to be ready. What I didn't realize was how quickly and how ruthlessly they would move against me, or that their retaliation would give me the perfect opportunity to implement the final phase of my plan. I returned to my lab that afternoon to find the door locked, access code changed. A security guard stood outside, avoiding eye contact. Orders from Mr. Winston, he mumbled. No entry pending investigation. Investigation of what? Data security concerns. Mr. Winston says you accessed confidential files without authorization. Of course. Classic Eldon. When threatened, counterattack. Frame me as the wrongdoer to undermine my credibility with the shareholders. The genetic database is literally my job, I said, keeping my voice level despite the rage building inside me. He shrugged uncomfortably. Just following orders, ma'am. I walked away, pulse pounding in my temples. My entire professional life was in that lab. Research, personal notes, testing protocols I developed over years. Eldon knew exactly what he was doing, cutting me off from my evidence. Back in my cottage, I found Mira waiting on the porch, face tight with worry. They're saying you stole proprietary data, she said, following me inside. Eldon called an emergency staff meeting, said you manipulated test results to make Porter look bad. I poured us both water, hand trembling slightly. And you? What do you think? I think 8 years of watching you triple check every result tells me all I need to know. She hesitated. There's more. They've already packed your lab equipment for inspection, and Porter's telling everyone you falsified the inbreeding coefficients. Perfect. They were moving even faster than I'd anticipated. Have they checked the backup servers yet? I asked casually. Mira's eyes widened slightly. What backup servers? I allowed myself a small smile. Exactly. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Midnight, East Barn. Come alone if you want to save your career. P. Porter. Offering what he thought was leverage. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won. Whatever game they were playing, I needed to understand the moves. The East Barn housed our most valuable breeding stallions. Walking there under moonlight, past security cameras I knew monitored every approach, I felt strangely calm. Beyond the paddocks, lights from the main house revealed silhouettes moving inside. Eldon working late, planning his next attack. Porter waited in the shadows by the barn entrance, a manila envelope clutched in his hands. He'd been drinking. I could smell whiskey from 6 feet away. Smart of you to come, he said, words slightly slurred. Dad wanted to just fire you tomorrow, but I convinced him to offer an alternative. How generous. He thrust the envelope toward me. Resignation letter. Sign it. Say you're leaving for personal reasons. Dad will give you a neutral reference and 6 months severance. I didn't touch the envelope. And if I refuse? Then we release evidence showing you altered genetic markers in the database. His smile was ugly now. Nobody will believe anything you said at that meeting once we prove you manipulated data. That's quite an accusation. He stepped closer, alcohol giving him false courage. We both know this industry runs on reputation. One whiff of scientific misconduct, and you'll never work with horses again. Is that why you called me here? To threaten me with fabricated claims? To give you a chance, Leora. He sounded almost sincere. You're brilliant, truly, but you don't understand how this business works. We sell dreams, not just horses. Nobody paying millions wants to hear about genetic risks. They deserve the truth. They deserve what they pay for. Winners. He tapped the envelope. Sign by morning or we release everything. Your call. After he left, I stood alone in the night air, listening to the soft nickering of horses worth more than most people's lifetimes. I opened the envelope. The resignation letter was dated 3 weeks ago, before the foals died, before my confrontation with Eldon. They'd planned this narrative perfectly. I'd resigned before making false accusations against the Winstons out of personal vindictiveness. Morning brought rain and chaos. My access card deactivated, email offline, phone buzzing with concerned messages from industry colleagues who'd heard rumors that I was under investigation for data manipulation. By noon, security arrived to escort me off the property. 3 hours to pack, 8 years of my life. As I loaded my car, Byron Merritt's sleek Bentley pulled up. The chairman stepped out, umbrella in hand. This seems precipitous, he said, watching the security guard hovering nearby. Eldon claims he's found evidence you altered testing data. Convenient timing, I replied. Very. Byron studied me carefully. The external auditors arrive tomorrow. Eldon insists they use his son's revised protocols rather than yours. Of course he does. Dr. Webb. Byron lowered his voice. Many shareholders were impressed by your presentation. If there's anything else we should know before this audit begins. I closed my trunk carefully. The genetic science speaks for itself, Mr. Merritt. Just make sure the auditors see the original database, not whatever version Eldon provides them. He nodded thoughtfully. Good luck, Doctor. I suspect we'll speak again soon. 3 days of limbo followed. I rented a small apartment in Lexington, fielded concerned calls from colleagues, and waited. Industry forums buzzed with speculation about my departure and rumors of issues with Winston Farms' prestigious breeding program. On day 4, my phone rang, Sheikh Hamad's assistant, requesting an urgent meeting. The next morning, I found myself in a private dining room at Lexington's most exclusive hotel, facing not just the Sheikh, but 5 other major Winston Farms investors. We've been denied access to the genetic database, the Sheikh explained without preamble. The external auditors report difficulties accessing original testing data. Eldon claims older records were corrupted in a server migration, added the Countess from Austria. Convenient, no? I kept my expression neutral. Very. Dr. Webb, the Sheikh continued, we have a proposition. Our consortium represents 62% of Winston Farms' external investment. We're prepared to demand complete transparency, including your reinstatement. But first, we need certainty that your claims are verifiable. And if Eldon has already altered the data, the Kentucky stable owner smiled thinly. That would constitute fraud against shareholders. A serious legal matter. The Kentucky stable owner. A serious legal matter. I considered them carefully. What exactly are you asking? 1. Evidence, the Countess said simply. If what you presented at the meeting is accurate, prove it independently of whatever Eldon might have tampered with. I allowed myself the smallest smile. As it happens, I can do exactly that. 2 weeks later, the Winston Farms Board of Directors convened an emergency session. I wasn't invited, but Byron kept me updated via text. Eldon claiming vindication, Porter presenting corrected genetic analyses showing minimal risk in their breeding program, external auditors expressing frustration with data availability issues. Then my phone buzzed with Byron's final message. Showtime. At precisely 2 p.m., Sheikh Hamad requested the floor and introduced his independent genetic consultant to present findings on Winston bloodlines. The consultant was Dr. Miles Chen, director of the Equine Genetics Institute and my former doctoral advisor. His presentation was devastating. Comprehensive genetic analyses of 128 Winston horses, showing exactly the problems I'd identified. Blood samples taken directly from the horses by veterinarians representing the investor consortium, analyzed by 3 separate laboratories. Irrefutable evidence. As Eldon and Porter tried to challenge the findings, Sheikh Hamad delivered the coup de grace. He played the audio recording I'd made of Porter's midnight barn threat, his admission that they knowingly sold compromised horses, his attempt to coerce me into silence. By 6 p.m., the board had voted to remove both Winstons from operational control, pending a full investigation. By 8 p.m., my phone rang with an offer to return as Chief Genetic Officer, with expanded authority and double my previous salary. But the real satisfaction came 3 days later, when I walked into my restored lab to find Mira grinning beside a familiar computer. Remember how you always insisted on triple redundant backups for the genetic database? She asked, including the off-site server that only you and I knew about. I smiled. The backup that automatically archived every entry every change, every override, with user identification and timestamps. The same, she confirmed. The database Eldon and Porter didn't know existed when they tried erasing their tracks. She handed me a flash drive, every alteration they made to the records. After locking you out, timestamps match exactly when they were trying to frame you. Perfect. The legal consequences unfolded gradually. The board's investigation uncovered years of deception. Lawsuits from buyers of compromised bloodlines mounted. The financial penalties would be staggering. 1 month after my return, I found Porter waiting beside my car after work. He'd lost weight, his designer clothes replaced by jeans and a rumpled shirt. "You won," he said simply. "Dad's reputation is destroyed. Our family's legacy is in ruins." This wasn't about winning, Porter. Then what was it about? Revenge? I thought about the foals who had died suffering, the buyers who had been defrauded, the genetic lines permanently damaged by arrogance and greed. "Justice," I answered, "for the horses that couldn't speak for themselves." He looked away. "The DA's office contacted me today. They're considering criminal charges for securities fraud." "I'm not surprised. I could go to prison, Leora." His voice cracked. "Help me. Tell them I was just following my father's instructions. Like you helped me when your father threatened my career? When you tried to frame me for your mistakes?" I shook my head. "You made your choices, Porter. Now face them with whatever dignity you can muster." As he walked away, shoulders slumped, I felt no triumph, only the quiet satisfaction of knowing the truth had finally prevailed. 6 months later, Winston Farms operates under new management. Our breeding program adheres to the strictest genetic standards in the industry. The horses in our fields will produce generations of champions without hidden suffering. Eldon accepted a plea deal. Massive fines, industry banishment. Porter cooperated with prosecutors and received probation. They've both disappeared from the racing world. As for me, I still walk the paddocks at dawn, watching foals with strong limbs gallop across Kentucky bluegrass. Their genetic profiles, transparent, ethical, honest, have made Winston Farms more successful than ever. My revenge wasn't destroying the Winstons. It was building something better from the ruins of their deception. A legacy of integrity that will outlast us all. Thank you so much for staying with this story until the end. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate justice, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this one. Drop a comment letting me know what you thought about Leora's revenge. Was it satisfying, or would you have handled things differently? Your engagement helps these stories reach more people who might enjoy them. Until next time, remember that sometimes the best revenge isn't about destruction, it's about building something better.